Power never announces when it's watching. It just adjusts its behavior around you. That line isn't poetic, it's procedural. In high-level environments, attention is currency, and no one spends it loudly. The people who hold real influence don't scan rooms randomly, don't fixate emotionally, and don't obsess out of insecurity. They observe patterns. They log anomalies. And when something doesn't behave the way it's supposed to, it gets flagged. Here's a fact most people never hear. Individuals in positions of authority are trained, formally or informally, to notice deviations from expectation faster than excellence itself. Excellence can be managed. Predictability can be optimized. But deviation, that demands focus. Because deviation means either risk or rare value. That's where you come in. You didn't stand out by trying. You didn't announce your presence. You didn't play the usual social instruments, overeagerness, validation hunger, strategic flattery. You simply moved differently. And to someone who understands power, that's louder than ambition ever could be. The first thing they noticed wasn't your talent. Talent is common. The second thing wasn't your confidence. Confidence is often borrowed. What caught their attention was something far less convenient. You didn't respond the way leverage expects people to respond. Praise didn't soften you. Pressure didn't speed you up. Opportunity didn't make you trip over yourself like it owed you something. That alone is enough to disrupt an entire internal ranking system. And yes, there's a strange humor in it. While others are polishing their personas and rehearsing impressive nods in mirrors, you're accidentally triggering internal reviews in rooms you've never entered. Somewhere, someone with influence is quietly thinking, why didn't that work on them? Which is a very uncomfortable thought for someone used to things working. This isn't about flattery. It's about mechanics. Power doesn't obsess over noise. It obsesses over what doesn't bend. And once something resists quietly, it stops being ignored and starts being studied. That's when observation turns into fixation. Number one, you don't react the way leverage expects you to. Power studies reactions because reactions reveal where control lives. Most people think influence is about dominance, but it's really about predictability. Say the right thing and they smile. Apply pressure and they rush. Offer opportunity and they suddenly become agreeable, grateful, flexible. Those reactions make people easy to place, easy to steer, easy to use. And then there's you. When leverage shows up in your life, you don't perform the expected dance. Praise doesn't inflate you. Criticism doesn't collapse you. Pressure doesn't speed you into bad decisions. Opportunity doesn't turn you into someone desperate to please. That alone creates friction in the mind of someone powerful. They expect emotional movement. They get stillness instead. This isn't because you're cold or detached. It's because your center isn't outside of you. You don't borrow your sense of worth from approval or urgency. You don't confuse access with importance. So when someone applies a lever, nothing dramatic happens. And when nothing happens, power gets uncomfortable. People in control rely on patterns. They've seen thousands of reactions before yours. They know what confidence looks like when it's fragile. They know what ambition looks like when it's hungry. They know what fear looks like when it's dressed as politeness. Your response doesn't fit the pattern, and that's where attention locks in. What really disturbs them is that your calm isn't passive. You still decide. You still move. You just don't move because of them. That breaks an unspoken rule most people live by. React first, think later. You reverse it. You think first. Sometimes you don't react at all. That signals something rare, internal authority. Power notices this because it can't rush you into revealing yourself. It can't corner you emotionally. It can't reward you into submission or scare you into alignment. That means it has to slow down and study you instead of steering you. Observation replaces control, and observation easily turns into fixation. You become interesting not because you're loud, impressive, or dominant, but because leverage keeps failing quietly. And when leverage fails, power doesn't walk away, it leans in. Number 2, you carry conviction without broadcasting it. Most people announce what they believe because they're still trying to convince themselves. They say it louder, repeat it often, and decorate it with passion so no one notices the cracks underneath. Conviction, the real kind, doesn't behave like that. It settles. It gets quiet. And that quiet is exactly what gets noticed. You don't make speeches about your values. You don't constantly explain who you are or what you stand for. You move as if those decisions were already made a long time ago. Your boundaries show up in what you decline, not in what you argue about. Your beliefs show up in consistency, not in performance. To someone who understands power, this is instantly recognizable. People in influence-heavy positions spend their lives surrounded by loud certainty that collapses under pressure. They've watched confident voices fold the moment comfort is threatened. So when they meet someone who doesn't advertise their inner world, yet never contradicts it, it stops them, because that kind of conviction can't be negotiated easily. What really pulls their attention is that you don't seek agreement to reinforce yourself. Disagreement doesn't provoke you. Validation doesn't energize you. You don't scan faces to check if your stance landed well. That signals self-trust, and self-trust is rare because it's built through hard internal work most people avoid. Your decisions feel settled before the conversation even starts. Not stubborn, not rigid, just grounded. That grounding tells a powerful observer that you're not operating from trend, pressure, or group mood. You're operating from an internal compass. And anyone who's climbed far knows how many people lose that compass on the way up. There's also something subtly threatening about it. If your beliefs don't need reinforcement, they also don't need protection. You won't bend them for access, applause, or safety. That makes you difficult to influence but incredibly reliable once aligned. Power becomes obsessed with this because it recognizes something familiar and uncomfortable at the same time. Familiar, because this is how authority actually works when it's real. Uncomfortable because it can't be manufactured, borrowed, or imposed. You either have it or you don't. And when someone carries conviction without noise, without display, without explanation, it leaves a mark. Not because they demanded attention, but because they didn't need it. Number 3, you don't need permission to move forward. Most people live in a constant state of seeking approval. They check the room before they speak, hesitate before they act, and weigh every step against someone else's expectations. That's the rhythm of predictability, and it's comforting to power because it's easy to manage. You, on the other hand, don't play by that script. You move when it makes sense to move. You act when clarity calls for action, not when someone else gives the green light. And that independence is magnetic. Power notices this instantly, because anywhere there's authority, there's an invisible ledger of control. People are expected to orbit around it, to defer, to wait. But you refuse to orbit. You create your own path, make your own calls, and accept responsibility for the outcomes. You don't ask permission because you've already answered to something far more important, your own internal standard. That tells someone with influence that you operate on a different plane, where timelines, hierarchies, and favors have less power over your movement than most people realize. This doesn't mean recklessness. It means discernment. You weigh consequences, assess risks, and take calculated steps without needing someone else's stamp of approval. That combination of autonomy and accuracy is rare. Most people can be nudged, pressured, or distracted into submission. You can't. That frustrates, fascinates, and eventually obsesses those who are used to managing outcomes through compliance. What makes it even more intriguing is the subtlety of it. You're not loud about independence. You don't boast about self-reliance or flaunt audacity. You simply act. And when someone powerful sees results coming from a source they didn't control, the mind starts spinning. They study, analyze, and try to figure out the mechanics behind the movement. Independence like that is disarming. It's a quiet challenge. It says without words, I am accountable to my own compass. I don't need anyone else to authorize my direction. And to someone who thrives on controlling movement, that is not just noteworthy, it's unforgettable. You stop being part of the predictable equation, and suddenly all attention is on understanding rather than controlling you. Number 4, you absorb information without becoming loyal to the source. Most people respond to power the same way. They consume what's offered and immediately attach themselves to it. Advice becomes gospel, access becomes allegiance, favor becomes emotional debt. It's an unconscious transaction. The more you receive, the more you owe. You don't play that game. You listen, you learn, you take what's useful, and you leave the rest behind. You don't turn knowledge into loyalty automatically, and that difference is magnetic. Someone who wields influence notices this immediately because it's disarming and in some ways unsettling. They're used to people bending under the weight of attention, resources, or insight. Their position creates a gravitational pull, and most fall in naturally. But when you take what matters without tying your identity to it, it signals autonomy. You are absorbing power like a sponge, but you don't let it seep into control over your own decisions. That's rare. That's dangerous in a subtle, quiet way. This doesn't mean you're cold or detached. It means you evaluate critically. You separate value from source. You keep your standards intact, regardless of who delivers the insight, the opportunity, or the praise. That ability to compartmentalize information while staying aligned with yourself shows someone powerful that you are not a lever to be pulled. You're a mind that acts independently of influence, and that makes you inherently fascinating. The obsession starts there. Power doesn't encounter autonomy often, and when it does, it wants to understand it, study it, and almost replicate it. They analyze how you take value without surrendering identity, and they notice the efficiency and clarity that comes with it. They realize you are self-contained, impervious to manipulation, and untethered from the invisible debts most people carry. In essence, you make observation unavoidable. Your independence of thought is a quiet statement. I will take what helps me grow, but I will never owe my mind to anyone else. That makes you not only noticeable, but memorable. Someone with power starts to track your moves, study your patterns, and in a way, quietly fixates, because autonomy at that level is rare, and when it exists, it commands attention without ever demanding it. Number 5, you don't rush intimacy with opportunity. Most people see opportunity and immediately step forward, sometimes tripping over themselves in the process. They want access, approval, or advantage so badly that they forget to evaluate whether the opportunity is actually aligned with their path. You don't operate like that. When something beneficial appears, you pause, you study it, you measure it against your principles, your timing, and your vision. That patience isn't hesitation, it's precision. And someone with real power notices this immediately. What catches their attention isn't that you're careful, it's that you're selective in a world where urgency is worshipped. Most people scramble, they overcommit. They say yes too quickly because scarcity thinking makes them desperate. You, however, are untethered from that desperation. You don't cling to opportunity as if it defines you. You treat it as a tool, not a trophy, and that mindset signals depth. Depth in the eyes of power is irresistible. This behavior quietly flips the usual power dynamic. Usually influence works because people chase it. They signal, align, and adjust themselves to gain favor. You're not chasing, you're choosing, and choosing carefully shows that your energy, attention, and allegiance are scarce commodities, not in a bragging way, but in a way that only someone truly self-possessed understands. That scarcity is magnetic because power recognizes value in autonomy. It's easy to influence someone hungry, hard to influence someone satisfied in their own process. There's a subtle tension in watching you operate this way. You don't broadcast hesitation, fear, or calculation. You simply allow your decisions to unfold in their own time. That unpredictability paired with discernment triggers fascination. You're no longer just another participant in the system. They have to study you. They have to understand what drives your timing and why your alignment matters more than opportunity itself. You end up in a rare position. You're respected before you're even fully understood. Someone with influence can't manipulate your pace, and that forces them to acknowledge a truth most people never encounter. Your attention, your presence, and your choices are yours first. And when power encounters that, obsession is almost inevitable. Number 6, you're not impressed by proximity to status. Most people behave like a satellite caught in the gravity of titles, connections, or reputations. They nod too quickly, smile too readily, and bend just enough to get noticed by someone they consider important. You don't. Status doesn't alter your posture, your judgment, or your perception of value. To someone who understands real power, that is immediately striking. It's not arrogance, it's discernment. You evaluate substance, not symbolism, and that's an incredibly rare quality. Power relies on influence over those who are dazzled by proximity. When people care more about who something comes from than what it actually is, they are easy to manage. You refuse to play that game. You treat people as systems, ideas, or opportunities, not as badges of importance. That signals two things at once: intelligence and independence. You see the structure, but you are not enslaved by it. You measure everything by its real-world relevance, not by its social weight, and that makes someone powerful sit up and take notice. What's fascinating to them is that your indifference is not disengagement. You're present, you're aware, you're strategic, but you're never awed. That balance is uncomfortable for those used to admiration. When your attention isn't earned by proximity, it has to be earned by merit. And merit, especially quiet merit, is far harder to manufacture than a title or a connection. This ability creates a magnetic tension. While others fumble to impress, you operate on your own terms, and that independence is disruptive to predictable hierarchies. Power doesn't just like this, it becomes curious, even obsessed. They want to know how someone can navigate influence without being influenced themselves. They analyze, track, and study your interactions, because understanding that mindset becomes a puzzle worth solving. By refusing to be dazzled by status, you effectively reset the rules of engagement. You teach them, silently, that your alignment is with reality, not with symbols of authority. And when someone powerful realizes they can't leverage their usual tools on you, fascination replaces control. You've become a variable they can't calculate, a mind that doesn't bend to expectation and that is impossible to forget. Number 7, you make decisions that cost you socially. Most people avoid social friction at all costs. They say what's expected, nod when convenient, and choose alignment over integrity to keep themselves in the good graces of others. You don't. You make choices that feel right to you, even if they ruffle feathers, break harmony, or leave you isolated temporarily. That kind of decision-making is rare, and it doesn't go unnoticed by someone who has real power. They are trained to spot people who prioritize influence over principle, and you are doing the exact opposite. There's a subtle magnetism in that kind of behavior. When someone consistently chooses alignment with their internal compass over social ease, it signals independence and strength. It's a silent message. You are not a pawn, not a follower, not someone easily swayed by approval or gossip. You're accountable first to yourself, and the consequences of that accountability, whether loss of popularity, rejection, or criticism, don't derail you. That unshakable internal logic is fascinating to observe, especially for someone accustomed to people bending for acceptance. What makes it even more compelling is that your choices carry weight without theatrics. You're not performing courage, you're exercising it naturally. You accept that friction is part of decision-making, and you don't manufacture drama to prove a point. That level of authenticity, combined with resilience in the face of social cost, is the kind of thing that holds the attention of someone powerful. They see that you operate on principles, not popularity, and that creates a quiet but intense form of respect and intrigue. Power notices this because it's rare to see someone who is willing to risk immediate approval for long-term integrity and vision. Most people make concessions without realizing how often they compromise their own authority in doing so. You, on the other hand, understand that social discomfort is temporary, but the cost of abandoning your truth is permanent. That realization, witnessed by someone who is always evaluating influence, transforms casual observation into focused attention. They start studying how you navigate social landscapes with autonomy, and before long, fascination becomes obsession. Number 8, you don't over-explain your choices. Most people feel compelled to justify every move they make. They over-explain because they fear judgment, because they crave validation, or because they hope someone powerful will nod in approval. You don't. Your decisions are made, and that's enough. You act, you commit, and you move forward without spilling the reasoning behind every choice. That restraint is subtle but powerful, and it doesn't escape the notice of someone with influence. When you don't over-explain, it communicates something deeper than confidence. It communicates authority. You show that your mind operates independently, that your actions are measured by your own standards, and that you are accountable first to yourself, not to the approval or comprehension of others. People who are used to controlling outcomes expect explanations. They rely on them to understand, to predict, to manipulate. When you withhold them, it creates a gap, a space they can't fill, and suddenly their usual leverage becomes useless. That gap is magnetic. What's fascinating to someone powerful is how calm and deliberate this behavior feels. You're not defensive. You're not secretive in a manipulative sense. You simply understand the value of economy in communication. Every word has weight because you don't waste them on justification. That means when you do speak, it carries authority. It draws attention without demanding it. And in a world where most people constantly perform to be heard, quiet command is more compelling than any performance. There's also a psychological twist here. When people can't predict your motives, they start studying them. Observation replaces influence. They analyze patterns looking for alignment, intention, or potential weakness. They can't push you with explanations because you've already decided what matters and what doesn't. By not over-explaining, you force power to engage with you on your terms. You make your choices self-contained, unassailable, and inherently intriguing. You become someone whose decisions demand respect simply because they are decisive, autonomous, and deliberate. And anyone who has spent their life managing people for a living knows that when someone refuses to justify themselves unnecessarily, it's impossible to ignore. Number 9, you recover fast without spectacle. Most people handle setbacks like performances. A small mistake becomes a scene. A failure becomes a story told to anyone who will listen. Apologies are dramatic, explanations are lengthy, and emotions are exaggerated. You don't operate that way. When something goes wrong, you adjust, recalibrate, and move on quietly. The recovery is fast, clean, and almost invisible. To someone with influence, that efficiency is mesmerizing because it signals mastery without needing to broadcast it. Recovering without spectacle demonstrates control on multiple levels. It shows that your focus isn't on what others think, but on what matters. You don't waste energy on appearances or trying to shape perception. You fix, adapt, and continue, leaving observers to wonder how you remain composed while chaos surrounds most people in the same situation. Power notices this immediately because emotional management is one of the hardest skills to develop, and those who achieve it without fanfare are incredibly rare. What makes it compelling is that your composure isn't just reactionary, it's habitual. You've built resilience into your process. Mistakes don't derail you because your foundation is stronger than circumstance. You don't need to justify, explain, or dramatize your missteps to be respected or understood. That self-contained approach to setbacks communicates authority silently. Anyone who thrives on influence recognizes that when someone handles adversity this way, they are not easily manipulated or derailed. There's also a psychological effect at play. People with power are used to seeing struggles amplified. People falter under observation, and errors become leverage points. When they encounter someone who recovers gracefully and efficiently, it disrupts expectations. They are forced to pay attention, to study, and eventually to respect that internal control. Observation replaces exploitation, and curiosity begins to turn into a subtle fascination. Recovering fast without spectacle makes you unpredictable, calm, and reliable in ways others aren't. It's not about perfection. It's about consistency under pressure. And consistency like that, quiet and unassuming, commands attention from those trained to notice patterns. It's a form of strength that doesn't scream, yet it echoes louder than any display ever could. Number 10, you don't mirror the room to belong. Most people adjust themselves constantly to fit in. They copy tone, posture, opinions, and even energy to match the environment. It's subconscious, almost Pavlovian, but it's a survival mechanism. You don't do that. You remain consistent, grounded, and aligned with your own rhythm, regardless of who is watching or what the setting demands. That kind of unwavering presence doesn't go unnoticed by someone with real influence. It demands attention. Power thrives on predictability. Leaders, decision-makers, and high-level influencers expect patterns because they make people easier to manage. When someone adapts too much, they can be controlled, leveraged, or dismissed without much thought. But when you don't mirror the room, you break that predictability. You refuse to be a reflection of expectation, and that throws observers off balance in the most intriguing way. You're neither hostile nor compliant. You simply exist on your own terms, and that independence is magnetic. What makes it fascinating is that your consistency isn't rigidity. You can engage, adapt tactically, and collaborate. But the core of who you are, your principles, your energy, your judgment, remains intact. That creates a subtle tension. People notice that you belong nowhere by default, yet you are not alien. You are a variable that can't be mapped easily. For someone used to managing influence, that unpredictability combined with internal coherence becomes impossible to ignore. This behavior communicates more than confidence. It communicates authority over oneself. It signals that your actions and reactions are chosen, not reflexive. That makes manipulation difficult, persuasion less effective, and observation increasingly focused. Power, which usually relies on reading patterns to assert control, now finds itself studying a person who cannot be reduced to a formula. By refusing to mirror, you force attention in the most compelling way. Silently, deliberately, and unapologetically. You stand out not because you try, not because you perform, but because you remain whole while others fracture themselves to belong. That integrity and consistency, so rare in a world of social mirrors, ensures that someone with influence doesn't just notice you, they can't stop noticing. Number 11, you respect power without worshipping it. Most people either fear power or crave it. They bow, flatter, and defer because they've learned, consciously or not, that survival and advancement depend on it. Some try to fake understanding, mimicking confidence they don't truly feel. You don't. You acknowledge authority where it exists. You recognize influence when it's earned, but you never kneel mentally. You engage with power as a fact of reality, not as a deity demanding devotion. That distinction is subtle, but someone who wields real influence notices it instantly. Power is fascinated by people who can interact with it on equal terms without hostility or reverence. They're used to either sycophants or challengers, the obedient or the openly resistant. You occupy a rare space in between, attentive yet independent, respectful yet unbowed. That balance is disruptive. It signals that you understand the rules of the game but are not imprisoned by them. You see the structures, the systems, and the hierarchies, but you navigate them according to your own logic, not the expectation of approval. What makes it even more compelling is that your stance isn't performative. You're not trying to prove your toughness or your independence. You simply operate from clarity and self-trust. That presence, calm, steady, observant, is magnetic because it shows mastery without exhibition. Those who are used to commanding attention find themselves quietly studying how you move, how you react, and how you maintain composure in the presence of authority. By respecting power without worship, you create a dynamic where attention becomes mutual, not one-sided. You don't compete for influence, but your independence forces power to engage with you thoughtfully. They can't use fear, manipulation, or entitlement to shape you easily, and that makes you rare and captivating. This balance communicates something essential. You are neither a tool nor a threat in the conventional sense, but someone whose mind operates freely. That freedom, so uncommon, becomes unforgettable. Power doesn't ignore that. It fixates on it, trying to understand how someone can acknowledge authority fully without being consumed by it, and that fascination is both intense and enduring. Number 12, you create gravity instead of chasing momentum. Most people scramble to stay relevant. They chase trends, titles, and attention, hoping that visibility will translate into influence. They bend, adapt, and perform in ways that feel urgent but shallow. You don't. You don't chase the spotlight or the applause. You focus on building depth, consistency, and substance, and the world gradually bends toward you. That kind of presence is magnetic, and someone with real power notices it immediately. Creating gravity isn't flashy. It doesn't rely on noise or performance. It's the result of focused competence, quiet authority, and predictable reliability. When you operate this way, you don't need to hustle for approval or validation. Instead, people start seeking you out because your influence radiates naturally. Those with power are trained to see who draws attention effortlessly versus who clings desperately to it. You are in the first category. That distinction fascinates them. What makes it especially compelling is that gravity is persistent. Momentum is temporary. Trends fade, applause dies, and energy dissipates. Gravity pulls continuously, regardless of whether anyone is watching. You operate from a place of internal alignment, building skills, connections, and reputation quietly, but with purpose. Your presence has weight, and that weight forces observation and eventually respect. There's a subtle tension for someone who notices this. They are used to orchestrating influence, pushing people into movement, or leveraging energy to get results. But you are not moving for them. You are moving for yourself, yet the results ripple outward, bending attention your way without any effort. That makes you rare, challenging, and deeply intriguing. Power begins to study you, because gravity cannot be engineered with coercion or manipulation. It cannot be faked or borrowed. You are not chasing opportunity. You are becoming a constant. That constancy draws eyes, focus, and eventually fascination. In a world of frantic energy and performative ambition, someone who generates attraction by simply being aligned, disciplined, and substantial becomes impossible to ignore. You pull influence toward yourself without ever needing to ask for it. And that is a truth that power notices and quietly obsesses over. Number 13. You're comfortable being misunderstood for long periods. Most people panic the moment someone misinterprets them. They over-explain, justify, or retract, desperate to correct the perception. You don't. You understand that being fully understood isn't a prerequisite for moving forward, achieving, or maintaining authority. You're comfortable letting ambiguity exist, letting people wrestle with their assumptions while you quietly continue on your path. That patience and detachment from perception is magnetic to someone with power. What draws their attention is how counterintuitive this behavior is. In influence-driven environments, most people shape themselves around how others see them. They adjust, perform, and constantly monitor the impressions they leave. You, by contrast, maintain your consistency regardless of misunderstanding. You don't compromise your identity to clarify it. You operate according to your own internal logic, letting the world interpret you however it will, while your focus remains entirely on what actually matters. That kind of independence is rare, and it immediately signals strength and self-possession. Being comfortable with being misunderstood also communicates confidence at a level most people never achieve. You're not seeking validation through comprehension. Your decisions, actions, and intentions exist whether they're acknowledged or misread. That makes you unpredictable in the eyes of someone who wields influence, because they are used to leveraging misunderstanding as a weakness. With you, that tool fails. Misinterpretation doesn't bend you or shake you. It simply exists while you proceed. There's a psychological effect on those who notice this. Observation replaces manipulation. Power cannot force alignment or understanding, so it begins to study the source. They analyze why your clarity doesn't depend on consensus and how you maintain momentum without outside approval. That curiosity inevitably turns into fascination because they encounter someone who thrives in a space most people fear, the space between perception and truth, where autonomy reigns. Your comfort with being misunderstood is quiet, but profoundly unsettling for observers. It reveals a level of self-command and focus that cannot be engineered or copied. And when someone powerful witnesses it, they don't just notice. They become quietly obsessed with understanding how you operate in a world built on assumption and impression. Number 14. You operate as if you're already accountable to something higher. Most people drift through decisions as if the only accountability that matters is external. Bosses, peers, society, or circumstance. You don't. You operate under a self-imposed standard, a higher internal law that governs your actions quietly but relentlessly. You make choices as if someone unseen, unarguable, and unavoidable is watching, not in fear but in commitment to integrity and clarity. That kind of internal accountability is immediately noticeable to someone who wields real power. What captivates them is how rare it is. Most influence-heavy environments are filled with people whose actions are reactive, opportunistic, or conditional. Decisions are swayed by approval, fear, or gain. You, by contrast, move with a consistency and alignment that doesn't bend to circumstance. You don't need external validation to act rightly. Your compass is calibrated internally. That is magnetic because it signals a mind that cannot be easily manipulated, coerced, or bought. Your presence alone communicates reliability and depth. There's also an unsettling element for observers. They cannot predict or control you through the usual levers of power. You are accountable first to your own principles, and that means leverage, intimidation, or influence have minimal effect. They watch someone whose authority comes from within, and it disrupts their assumptions about how control works. That tension is fascinating. It draws attention because a person who is internally governed is a person who cannot be forced into the usual hierarchies, someone whose choices cannot be hurried or redirected. This form of self-accountability also demonstrates foresight. You operate as if every action has consequence beyond immediate recognition. Mistakes are rare because your higher standard preempts error. Decisions are deliberate, not impulsive. And when someone powerful observes this, they are compelled to study, to understand, and eventually to admire. Operating as if accountable to something higher makes you quietly irresistible to power. You move through the world untethered from manipulation, immune to distraction, and guided by a principle no external force can replace. That integrity, strength, and foresight aren't loud, but they leave a lasting impression. Power notices, and when it does, fascination follows almost inevitably. Power doesn't chase noise, flashy performances, or desperate approval. It watches, studies, and locks onto what is rare, consistent, and unyielding. When someone moves with internal authority, navigates life on their own terms, and refuses to bend for validation, attention shifts naturally, and obsession quietly follows. Every point we've explored, from carrying conviction without broadcasting it, to recovering swiftly without spectacle, to operating as if accountable to a higher standard, paints the portrait of a person who commands notice without ever demanding it. You are not defined by proximity, by the opinions of others, or by fleeting trends. You are defined by depth, presence, and self-mastery, and that is what captures the focus of those who wield real power. Understanding this changes everything. It isn't about manipulation or trying to impress. It's about building a life and a presence that naturally attracts observation and respect. Power responds not to those who conform or perform, but to those who act decisively, think independently, and hold themselves to a standard higher than any external expectation. That is the subtle magnetism that cannot be replicated, borrowed, or taught. It must be embodied. And once it is, fascination follows like a shadow, because people with influence recognize and cannot ignore what they cannot control. If you've absorbed this, you now know the unspoken dynamics of attention, influence, and quiet power. You know what it takes to stand apart without performing, to draw eyes without chasing, and to create gravity in a world of momentum. If this resonated with you, make sure you don't let it stop here. Subscribe to the channel for more insights that uncover the hidden mechanics of influence. Like the video if it hit hard, comment your thoughts and experiences below, and share it with someone who needs to understand these truths. The journey to becoming truly noticed without bending has just begun, and the deeper you go, the more undeniable your presence becomes. Stay blessed always.